let's get started with it. Talking about everything navigation. Just give me a minute. Actually, I forgot to turn on my webcam and let my whole screen with you guys so it becomes more visible. Okay, it's a lot better now. Okay, so we will be talking about everything related to navigation in Android. So you already know about means this slide for us. So first and foremost thing that we will be talking about is fragments. So what are fragments? You might have been working with activities. So activity is a larger part of your activity screen, of your app screen. Everything in your app is inside an activity. So everything you see on your app, every UI is a part of an activity. But then there are fragments. What are fragments? So fragments are smaller portions of your screens that can be dynamically changed and accessed. Every fragment has its own life cycle. Just activity has its life cycle. Parts of your UI screen that can be arranged differently inside one activity. These can be considered as some views. These are called fragments. As you can see on your screen that here we have two mobile phones with two different activities, and inside them they are in each activity. So you can add separate views inside a fragment and then add a fragment inside an activity. So the example goes like this: if you are building an app, so when you are using the Gmail app on your mobile phones, list of all the emails you have received, and then the inside a new screen. So when you are using this tablet, so what happens is side of your screen you get all your emails, and on the right side of your when you click on the you get your email open in the second fragment. In this way you can create dynamic apps. So uh, for mobile screen it just shows the, and for tablets as they have more space the email list you also show inside another fragment. So these are fragments. You can consider them as building blocks of your UI, and that has its own life cycle, and you can code separately for them. We will be creating some fragments and this will become more clear in that. Okay, so movement between fragments. You can also navigate between different activities. For example, you might have been using intent to move from one activity to other activity using start activity. So when you are using fragments, there is something called the navigation architecture component. It helps you to build us an architecture that the activity architecture. Google back in 2018 introduced an architecture to build your apps that more scalable, easily, and efficiently. Because moving in activities is very complicated using multiple things. You cannot see the whole visualize map. You cannot see the map of your navigation. So they introduced something called navigation component that we will be implementing today. So it is the preferred architecture these days, but still people are using activities and you can use them as well inside the navigation architecture component as well. But Google says that you should be preferring the single activity architecture with multiple fragments. So fragment, what is the difference between fragment and your activities inside the life cycle? So there are some extra methods that you have to use when you are working with fragments. So when you are using activities, you inflate your layout using set content view odd or layout dot activity main inside your own create function. So when you are using fragments, instead of doing that in on create, your own create view created. So these and layout is inflated, which has been
Kashif, we are not able to hear you. Also, your video has just freezed. Guys, please don't leave the meeting. He will join us soon.
Okay, sorry, internet got disconnected, so that is why we I had to leave. So let me just reshare my screen and we will continue. Okay, so there is something called the backstack, and let me just turn on my video as well. Okay, so there's something called the backstack. So it is a stack you might have been learning about, like in first in first out thing. So what a backstack does is that when you are moving inside a, you go from screen 1, then screen 2, then screen C, like activity A, then activity B, then activity C. You move back from activity C, always when you are at activity C and you jump back to activity A. This is example. Every transaction, every activity transaction that you are doing, what happens is that it comes first and first out. So on top of you place other activity that is coming to B and C, and then similarly when you are working with fragments, so every fragment is activity. So first of all, your fragment transaction is then fragment A, then you go to fragment B, and then you go to fragment C. So all these fragments are inside a single activity, but you move in between the fragments, not in between the activities. So this is the whole. You don't have to use multiple activities. You just use multiple fragments and move in between those fragments from A to B, B to C, and back. So this is the whole concept of backset that when we start building our app. So let's start doing some coding. Let's set up some code previously that we will be using in
Hi,
throughout.
Karthik.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. Your screen is not visible.
Oh, sorry. So we were talking about fragments. So let obviously. So what that you can see, and let me. So the app currently has a single screen with three movies. So the movie items are coming from this. You don't have to figure out how these movies are being shown. That whole video. So what currently is happening is that I have a main activity, and inside the main activity, this is the layout that we are showing currently. And do right now, instead of using an activity, we will start using fragments. Create a fragment. So for you have to go to uh, create a simple class. I will create by the name of movies fragment. Then you have to inherit movie fragment class from a super class called fragment. And inside the constructor of that, you have to pass layout your, basically you have to pass your layout. Dot layout name of my, okay, fragment underscore movie. So this is my layout that pre activity, but now I am passing the same layout to my fragment. And now inside on create view, as we talked that there are two additional methods inside fragments. One is the on create view and second is on view created. So what passing through constructor does is that we can get rid of the first method and it will handle the create view by calling this constructor. So we don't have to call that, and we can jump up to view created. So when our layout is created, it will open this on view created method, and then we can do all the things that we want to do. So this is how you can create a simple fragment, and then you can inflate the layout inside that fragment. So let's remove what we are
Sir,
doing
if
here.
you could just
Yeah.
increase the font size, uh,
Okay.
the audience is not able to see clearly.
Uh, is it good now?
Yes, it's better. Thank you.
Okay. So this is how you can create a simple fragment and pass its layout to its constructor, and the constructor will take care of everything that you don't have to do all the on create few things. Okay, let's get back to our slides. So this is how you can create a simple fragment by first creating a and then inheriting that class from fragment and passing the layout to fragment. So then there are few principles of navigation that you have to consider when you are building your Android app. The first and foremost is every app should have a fixed starting point, which means is that when you are using Facebook, so when you are opening Facebook, you never go to notification screen directly. You are always on. You never go to like once you open Facebook and you are on notifications. Second time you open Facebook and you are inside groups, and third time you open you are on your timeline. So every app should have a fixed starting point, and it should never change no matter what. So this is the first principle of navigation. The second is, as we talked about Backstack, so every navigation state should be represented in last in first out manner. So when you move from one fragment A to B to C, when you pop up your fragment C, when you come back from fragment C, you should always come back to fragment B, not to fragment A. So it is last in first out. So whatever comes in the last goes out first. So this is the second principle of navigation. And then there is something called the up button. And so there are two back buttons inside your Android app. One is the physical back button on your Android device that you use to navigate through different apps. Then there is an up button. So what is the up button? It is a stop arrow that you see in your app on the left side. You use to go back. So you might have seen in different apps that when you are going back from one screen to other, when you reach the home screen, up button either hides the back arrow, either gets hidden, or it converts into snack bar and you can open your drawer from there. So that button should never leave your app. So whenever you are at the home screen, it should change either to either to snack, or it uh, should just hide it. So these are some principles of navigation that you have to take in mind when you are building your Android app. So to, that is the first thing, that your app, the up button should never leave your app. And the second principle is also with the up button. So inside your app, when you are using your app, your up button and your physical button should do the same. If your up button is moving from fragment B to A, then your physical back button should do the same. Their behavior should be the same. Their behavior should not differ at any point inside your app. So these are few principles. The next thing is navigation component. So what navigation component does is that it, it helps you visualize your whole navigation inside your app. Let me just show you an app, so it becomes more clear. It will take time. Let me just open another project. So what navigation component does is that it provides you where you can see all the things that are happening inside your app. For example, I am moving from one screen to this and this and this. So in this way, you can visualize the whole map of your app, from which fragment you are moving to where, from which screen you have to move where. Then there are conditional navigations. For example, I want to go from this fragment to this and then to this. So these provide me a visual design. So if a newcomer comes and he wants to take an overview of my app, so he will just go to one of these graphs. For example, he comes to this graph, and the first screen is this. Let me just zoom it. So for example, a newcomer comes and he says, okay, let me just check how the flow goes of the app. So he will just take a look at this screen. Is it connected next? Then it comes to recent catalog, then it goes to catalog fragment, then it goes to navigation cart, and then so on and so forth. So it makes the whole navigation part easier to understand, easier to navigate, and easy to handle as compared to activities, because activities provide no way to visualize all of these navigation concepts. So this is what navigation component is. Not just it just not provide a whole visualization concept. It also provides extension functions. It also provides some mechanism to pass data between different fragments or activities. You can also use activities in that. It's not limited to fragments as most people think it is. So it automatically handles the backstack. Back in the day when we used to do all these transactions using fragment, we had to manually take care of all the backstack handling. We had to take care of all the front and back fragments and everything. But since navigation component, just have to add the dependencies, you just have to make the connections that you just saw, and everything is the responsibility of navigation component from there. It will handle all the boilerplate code, it will generate all the boilerplate code for you. So you can just focus on your building your app rather than connecting and disconnecting things.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I think the screen is stuck. It's not able to see the app that you were describing currently.
uh, where are you stuck currently?
Still on the
My
coding
screen
part.
stuck. You can just unmute your mic and you can tell me that my screen is stuck. Let me just reshare my screen. Is it visible now?
Yes, it is visible now.
So let me just show you the whole thing again. So navigation graph gives you a map like this. So if I am here, then this is the next screen. This is where I can go. This is where I can go. If I go here, then from here I can go to these destinations. So it becomes more easy to understand where I am currently and where I can move from this current destination, and how many screens are there, which is what is the whole flow of the app. So it makes it the whole process easy to understand. So it gives you this visual form of layout that you can easily understand, but you can also do all using code as well. It supports both XML code and it also supports this visual hierarchy. So let's just do some question. If there is any question related to this, any question about navigation,
Yes, guys, if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat box.
we can make it an interactive session. If anyone has any question, he or she can just ask it. Yes, Sayed Lal, you have a question? Yes, Sayed Lal, this is the exact behavior you should be doing when fragment E is on visible on your screen. When you go back, or it should always be this case. It should always be going back to T, not to A or not to B. But there are some apps, for example, any social app that has logins implemented inside it. So you cannot go back to login screen if you are at the home screen by pressing back. You should not be going to the login screen again, because once the user has already logged in, it should not be logging back, because it will not be a good user experience. So instead of that, you should always be following this criteria, that when you are moving from fragment T back, you should be showing fragment E, not to A, not to B. What you can do in this case is that, yes, there are some conditions that um there are some conditions, for example, like the one you are saying here. What you can do is we will be talking about that at the end of the slides actually. You can use view mode, but let's just put your question on hold for now, because we will actually be discussing that at the end of the slide. Any other question about navigation till now? Yes, Mandeep. You can just write in the chat box, and we can have a look at it, and hopefully I can answer. Okay, let's just get back to slides again, and let's start moving on to some other concepts. So this is why the whole navigation component is actually introduced, to make your Android apps easy to handle, and all the backstack stuff should be done by the navigation components. So you should only focus on building your apps rather than writing boilerplate codes. So this is navigation component. So there are some parts of navigation component. It is not just the map of visual things and all the screens. It is not just that. So there are some other parts of navigation component as well. The first thing is navigation graph that we just saw, which gives you the whole hierarchy of elements and shows you a map of all navigation. And then comes something called nav host fragment, and then nav controller and safe argument. We will be discussing these in more details now, and we'll start building our app. So what navigation graph does is understood, I guess, because I just went on it in very details. So you can add fragments, you can add activities, you can handle action and destinations. So let's start building our navigation graph. Okay, is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible. The coding part is.
Okay. To add navigation component inside your application, what you have to do is you have to go to resources, then Android resource directory, and then you have to select navigation here. Just click OK, and then new and navigation resource file. Let's just give it the name as navgraph, and it will ask you to if you want to add the dependencies for it. Just click OK, and then it will automatically add all the dependencies that you need for creating navigation graph. So to add different fragments, you have to click on add. As you can see, you can add activities as movie as well as fragments. So currently we have only one fragment. So let's just add movie fragment here, and let's create some new fragments as well. The second fragment will be movie detail fragment. And for that, you have to repeat all the steps that we just did. Similarly, you have to pass your layout. I have already created the layout, so you don't have to. And create another fragment. Let's give it the name as save movies, and do the same for this as well. Let's go back to our navigation graph and add our other fragments, movie details, and then we have save movies. So now we have all the screens that we are going to need inside our app. So these things that we just created are called destinations. So what are destinations? Destination is every part of the UI that you can move to. So every fragment here is a destination. This is our movie fragment destination that currently selected as home destination. As you can see, this is the actually the home icon, and from this home icon you can understand that this current destination is actually the main destination of your app. So whenever you launch your app, this will always be the fixed destination of you, first destination, as we just learned inside the principles of navigation, that your app should always have a fixed starting destination. So this will always be your starting destination. Then we want to move from movies fragment, and we want to move to movie details whenever we click on one of the movies like this. So this is our movie. We should be able to click on it, and it should open the details of this movie. Okay, so I added a connection here. So this arrow is actually called the action. If we go to the XML, so here's our fragment. Here's its ID, its name, where it is inside uh, whole project. Then there's its label, and then the action. So the if you see the actions ID, it is called action movies to movie details. So it describes what the action actually does. So it moves from movie fragment to movie details fragment, and the destination is movie details fragment. The final destination for it is movie details fragment. So it starts from movie fragment destination, then an action occurs, and then we move to movie details fragment. Similarly, we want to move from saved movies fragment to movie details fragments again. So it creates a new save movie destination, and it has created a new action called save movies to movie details fragment. And this is the final destination again, same as our previous fragment. And from here, you can just arrange all the fragments. For example, as I showed you, there were too many fragments. So by clicking on this, it the fragments will automatically get arranged. Then inside here, there are some things that we will be exploring. This is how you can build a navigation graph. Let me just fix my main activity and show it to you. Let's just comment this out. I will have to do the same thing. I guess I did that previously. So let's just copy our data because we will be moving everything to our movies fragment. Go to movies fragment. Here is our data. Let's, where is my move? Okay. So here I have to add a variable called movies fragment binding. Let's, let's just think as it will just inflate our layout, nothing more than that. Let's just run our app and check if our movies are still showing. Okay, so now we have only hello world showing because inside our activity main, let's go to activity main, and in here there's only this part of the layout. So even though we have added all our fragments inside our navigation graph, but still inside our main activity, we are not able to connect this main movies fragment destination, the start destination of our app, to our main activity. So this brings us to next part of navigation graph, which is which is called the fragment. So as it the names is in, can you see the slides?
Yes, visible.
Okay, so that brings us to the next part of the navigation component, which is the nav host fragment. So what, as the name suggests, is it hosts all the fragments that are inside our navigation graph. So inside our main activity, what we do is we create a simple fragment container, and that fragment container hosts all the fragments that we add inside our navigation graph. So there is one fragment container, and all the fragments move in between from fragment A to C to and up to so on inside that container. So this is the whole concept of that uh, Navos fragment. So let's add Navos fragment. I just have opened it up here so we can just do it quickly. So what you have to do is your main activity and add nav graph right here. Now there are some keys inside your fragment container that you have to add. The first is you have to set it as default nav host, which tells your activity that this is the main graph nav, this is the main nav host, and it is going to host every activity, every fragment that is inside the navigation graph. Then you have to tell this which navigation graph to use because inside your project. So here it and gets our main navigation graph. So let's run our app again. So now we have all the three movies that we had inside our movies fragment, and they are now showing. So do a QA again. Any questions still here? Yes, above we can actually set dynamic star destinations, but again, this is against the principle of navigation because every app should always have a single star destination. It should not be dynamic, but yes, that you can do that as well. But if eh, but you shouldn't be doing that. That is the only answer I think I should give. Okay. Any other questions about nav host and navigation graph? Yes, you can actually build the whole login system of your app inside Fragments. It doesn't do anything to that. You can do that easily. You can use you can use Firebase authentication. You can actually use Cognito authentication. There is nothing wrong with it. And actually, it makes it a lot easier to handle actually because when you're using activities for your login system, you can't go back to, for example, if someone forgets his password, or he wants to reset his password. You are moving in between activities, passing so many elements. So fragments make it a lot easier to handle using all the actions and destinations. It makes it easier as compared to activities. In my experience, I have felt that it is easier as compared to activities. Rohit, we will be discussing that at the end of the session. You can ask your questions about NavHost and navigation graph for now. When you have bottom navigation, what you can do is that you can create a separate navigation graph for, and then you can create a new graph for the rest of the flow of your app. So when your user moves from that login navigation graph, you shift to the new graph, and inside the new graph you have that bottom navigation setup, so you don't have to care about the visibility and invisibility of your bottom navigation view. So this is how you can handle that. Yes, you can. Actually, this is how you should be doing it. You should be using multiple navigation graphs for all the entries that are on your bottom navigation. You shouldn't be using, because when you use multiple navigation graph, it handles the backstack more efficiently. So there is something called multiple backstacks. So it so your app does not have a single backstack when you are using multiple navigation graphs. Every entry of your bottom navigation has its own backstack, and it is managed separately, which makes it easier to, for example, if you are inside your cart, when you are buying something and you are inside your cart, you want to check something else on your notification. For example, you get a notification, you switch to different entity on your bottom navigation, and you come back and you are no longer at your you no longer in your cart, and you cannot find the product again. So that is a bad user experience. So this is why you should be using multiple navigations graph, so that every backstack is handled separately, rather than when you go back and everything is gone and you can't search the fragment the product again. Okay, should I think we should move on. Actually, we will be doing that today at the end. So I think we should move on. Okay, so we have created the destinations and actions. So the next thing is Nav Controller. So I think you should have learned about extension functions. So what Nav Controller does is that it helps you to generate all the backstack, all the boilerplate code that previously you would be writing yourself using fragment managers, and you can just use find nav controller dot navigate, and then you can move from one fragment to other, and so on and so forth. So let's do that now. Okay, so let's get back to our Android Studio. So here we are at our fragment movie binding, and let me do something here. So you don't have to worry about the code that I have written inside the adapter, because that is not something you are learning today. So just consider this as a simple on item click listener. So what I will do here is that find nav controller. So what find nav controller will do is that it will get nav controller associated with your navigation graph and return it right here. And then you can use another function called navigate. So as the name suggests, what navigate does is that it navigates your fragment transaction from fragment A to B. So if you remember, we created an action from one destination to other. So inside that navigate, you can pass that action r.id, then action, and our action was movie movie details fragment. So this is all you need to do for moving from one fragment to other. No more or the boilerplate code of 10 to 20 lines just for moving from one fragment to another. So let's check if our find nav controller is working. So we have finally been able to move from our movie fragment to movie details fragment. Now I haven't written anything to handle the backstack here, but if I click back, I'm going back to the same fragment that I came from. So this is how this is why actually navigation component is so beneficial. You don't have to care about all the boilerplate code, all the backstacks and everything. You just have to write find nav control dot navigate, and the navigation component does all the hard things for you. But right now here, we are not seeing anything because we are not able to pass the data from this screen to this. So let's just move to our slides again. So this is the nav controller. You can use the nav controller to navigate from one fragment to another inside your nav graph. And for that, you have to add separate destinations and link those destinations with different actions. Okay, so the most interesting part. So there are multiple ways actually to pass data from one fragment to another or one destination to another, but the most efficient and better way is safe arguments. So safe arguments means that you can pass some arguments that are your data classes or integers, either they are primitive types or user created types, and you can use those variables inside your navigation graph and pass those using find nav controller.navigate. So one of them is safe arguments, the most followed one and the most better one. So safe arg is actually a plugin to Cradle. What it does is that it generates different classes that you can use to pass data from one fragment to another. So it does all the hard work for you. It just generates all the classes that are needed, and you just have to use those classes to pass your data. If anyone tried to use intents, so when you are using intent, you have to create an intent, then you have to pass those, and then you have to pass that intent to start activity to launch. Then you have to check those if the bundle values, if the bundle is null, if so many things that you have to do there. But safe arguments makes it a lot easier to pass data from one destination to another. Okay, so let's play with safe arguments. So for using safe arguments, the first thing that you have to do is you have to add your safe arguments plugin inside your project level Gradle file, and then inside your build.gradle app level file, you have to add this plugin, and then you can just sync your Gradle file and everything will be done. So let's move to our navigation graph. So what we have to do is that we have to uh, pass something from this movies fragment to this movie details fragment so that it can get all the data that is required by it and just show that data inside the screen. So you just have to click on this destination, then click add. So here the first thing is you have to give a name to it. So we are passing a movie, and then there are different types: integer, float, long, boolean, string, anything that you want to pass, parsable, serializable, references, anything that you want. So we will be passing something called the parcelable, and that is our movie. And again, it can be an array as well. You can pass an array of it. You can pass a nullable object as well, and you can also set default values. So there's so much many things that you can do with safe arguments, and you have to click add. And now both this action and this action can pass data to this fragment, because it is this fragment that is asking all the connections, that whenever something is connected to me, you have to give me this argument. Other than that, I will not accept this thing. So we talked about something called the parcelable. If I go to this movie class, there is an annotation right here that is parcelize, and this is implementing parcelable. So as the name suggests, parcelize and parcelable. So what it does, it converts all these variables to keys and values. When you are passing the data from one fragment to another, it does not go like this. It is converted, for example, is converted like something like this: ID, then its value, and then backdrop, and its value, and then this whole thing is passed to the next fragment. So that is why it is more efficient and it is fast. You can also use serializable, but when you are passing serializable things, it is not as efficient as parcelable. So you should be better using parcelize instead of serializations. So we have passed our, we have added our arguments here. Let's go to our movie details fragment. Sorry, let's first go to our movies fragment. So there are two ways basically that people use. The first thing is that you can pass a bundle just like you might be using inside activities, and you can use put parcelable and first give its name, and then this function is just running a movie, and you can then pass the value. Then this whole thing becomes key value pairs. And let's go to our movie details fragment. That's increment on view created. And just let me just add data info pointing, and just find it. So you have paused your movie from fragment movies, and now the thing is, how would you be getting that movie inside your movie details, inside your movie details fragment? So for that, what you have to do is you have to create a variable, and then what say fragment data in the background is that it created some classes. uh, move I always forget that it goes the other way. The movie detail fragment args. This is a background class that is generated by safe arguments. What it does is that it takes the arguments from the fragment that it is coming from, and then we can use property delegate named navogs. So what navogs are? These are the navigation arguments that we just passed from fragment A, and then we are getting it from fragment B. So this is you have to do right here. So binding, I actually did something called data binding in the background, and I will just pause out movie. And what you can do is you can do find view by ID, or you can use binding. For example, if I add binding dot movie poster dot anything that I want to add here, and then you can get it from, for example, if I do movie poster dot text equals to args dot movie details, so I can do that as well. So let's check if everything is okay and it is working. Okay, so now we have all our pictures, our rating, our overview, the release date, and our code is working fine. So just to recap, the first thing that you have to do is you have to go to navigation graph. You have to tell navigation graph that we need this argument inside this fragment, and it is mandatory. It is not nullable. Then this is our class. We have to implement the parcel interface to make it parcelable so that the from one fragment to second fragment becomes more efficient and fast. Then movie details fragments, sorry, movies fragment, and we are passing currently we are passing a bundle here. We are going to go to our movie details fragment, and we are getting fragment arguments through a property delegate, and then we can use this variable to access that movie variable. So this is all that we have to do to pass variables from one fragment to another. The second way that is the better way actually is a nav controller to navigate. So the safe hours plugin also generated some other classes as well. So first the name of fragment, movies fragment, directions. What are directions? These are the directions that can be implemented from the current destination that we are currently standing on. So movies fragment directions dot action movie detail movie details fragment. Then you can see that this function is saying you have to pass movie here. So let's pass movie. So these are the classes that are generated in the background by the navigation argument, sorry, safe arguments. And let's check if everything is working fine. So everything is working fine. So this is what safe args is, and this is how you can use safe arguments from your one fragment to the other. So let's do a QA again and questions. Okay, guys, any question? Okay, no question. Okay, so these are safe args, and then comes a special class called view model. Let me just first show you something. The use case. So currently we're at our movies fragment. So we can move from movies fragment to our movies details fragment. And this button is supposed to add this to our fragments, save movies fragment. So whenever you go to your saved movies fragment, you can see all the movies that you have added to the saved movies, right? So currently all is that we have about the movies is residing inside a movies fragment. We get that data to our saved movies because we only want to show the movies that are saved by the user. If if a movie isn't saved, then we don't want to show that movie. So this is the use case that we are going to implement right now. So there's a special class called view model. So when you learned about activities, I think the first thing you should have heard is that whenever you rotate the file screen, your activity gets recreated and all the data inside that activity is lost, right? So what view model does is that it is a special class that inherits from another superclass called view model or Android view model. What it does is that it saves all the data that shouldn't actually be destroyed, but gets destroyed when a configuration change occurs. So when you move your activity, everything gets destroyed. But when you store all the data inside view model and then you get that data from the view model inside the activity, nothing gets destroyed because it has its own life cycle. It does not depend on the life cycle of any activity or any fragment. So this is the all the things about view model. You can see in this right here. So when an activity is created, on create gets called. Similarly, on start, on resume, then destroy, on create, on start, resume, and finally the activity gets destroyed. So when during all that time period, when all these things are happening, the view model never gets changed. And that is why all the data inside the view model survives configuration changes. So if a if an activity gets paused, nothing happens to view model. Nothing happens to view model. On destroy, nothing happens to model. And similarly, you can also use view model to communicate between different fragments. For example, if we save data a movie details fragment, that data can be accessed or saved movies fragment. So this is how we can use view model. First, to save data from configuration pages, so that our data never gets destroyed. And the other thing is that we can share data between different fragments or between different activities view model. So there are two types of property delegates for view models. One is the view models and the other is the activity view model. So let's create a view model and then let's just implement the whole use case that we were talking about. So I'll be creating a new package here called view model, and then I'll be creating simple Kotlin class called view model. So as I said, it will be inheriting from another class called view model. I think I set the wrong view model. So you have to slash android x dot lifecycle view model. So this is all you need to do to make a view model. And then let's create this view model inside our movies fragment. Model we just have type model, and I have to give the type of that view model. This is our view model, and then what you can do is you can just write by view models. This is all to get a view model. Another principle of view model is that all your business logic related data, like these popular movies, should not reside inside your views. So this data should be inside view models, and we will be getting this data which is called MVPM model view. And so your activity or view part of it, and then you have view model that we just created, and then you have your views, sorry, your models. So this is our model. Main activity or any fragment is our view, and then we have view model. All of your data, every data, all the data should be inside your view model, because the whole purpose of your view model is that the data you need should not get destroyed when you are using fragments or activities on configuration chain. So we have it in our movies fragment, and now we can access our view model dot popular movies. Let's create another variable for view model the same way. private file, view model. Let's add an on click listener
I think the
to our.
screen share has stopped.
Okay, just give me a minute. I'll share it again. Okay, it is. Is it visible now?
It is visible.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. So let's add a click listener. Let's create a new panel. Save movies. List of type. What is of movie? And whenever the user clicks on save button, we add viewModel.movies dot add, and we will add our movie to the saved movies list. So we have done this, and now let's go back to our movies fragment, and inside on create, let's do a login statement and print saved movies. Saved movies. Let's see if all movies are getting saved or not. So this is our. Let's click on save, and let's go back. T. So yeah, I had opened the wrong emulator. So in here you can see that when we came back, let me do it again. I will add this to saved movies, but when I go back, the saved movies is empty. Now there is something called a shared view model and a simple view model. So when you initialize a view model by view models, every fragment will have a separate instance of this view model. But if you want to share a view model between multiple fragments, for if you want to share data, so for that, instead of by view models, you have to do it by activity view models. So what activity view models does is that you can read this as well. But what activity view models does is that it takes the view model and attaches it to activity. So during the life cycle of the activity, the data inside that view model gets saved, and every fragment or every activity gets the same instance of the view model. And by doing that, all the fragments or all the activities get the same data that is contained inside that view model. So let's edit it here as well. So activity view models, and let's go back to our app and check if everything works now. So currently we have an empty list. Now I will save this movie, and when I get back, now our movie is getting saved. So this is how to communicate between different fragments and share data between different fragments, and also make your data survive configuration changes. So you guys just learn MVVM as well. So any questions, guys? Any questions related to view model? Well, that means either I am very good in explaining things, or none of you are getting anything that I am saying. So let's go back to our code, and we will be implementing bottom navigation now. So well, that's good to hear. Okay, for bottom navigation, as a nav graph inside a main activity. So this is the layout of our main activity. We have a fragment container view and a constraint layout. So in order to share the bottom navigation to all the fragments, we have to add it to the main activity. Because if you add bottom navigation to a separate fragment, it will be inside the layout of that fragment only. So let's add some bottom navigation. So in order to make bottom, we have to create a menu first. So let's go to Android resource directory again. Android resource directory, and then we have to go to menu, click OK, and then you have to create a menu resource file. Give it a name, nav underscore menu, and then you have to add some menu items to it. Let's give them some names. So our main fragment is a movies fragment. Let's give it movies and name saved. So we have the go to add the menu here, menu, so you can see both of our entries are now here. Let's run our app. Okay, now sorry, so now our app has a bottom navigation. It is not working right now, so let's make it work. So navigation component also makes it so much easier to implement. That is so much easier. Back in the days, we had to add on-click listener, navigation listener, and so many things just to implement a simple bottom navigation view. So navigation component for you is so much easier as compared to what we used to do back in the day. So what you have to do is you have to check the name of your, so the ID of your fragment inside your navigation graph. So here we have its ID saved movies, and you have to give the same ID to the menu right here. So ID and saved movies. And what is the ID of the there? Oh, I gave the wrong ID. Now we are done. That is everything you have to do to implement bottom navigation. Okay, it is not okay. There's one thing more that you actually have to do. So bottom navigation. I think I didn't give it an ID. Sorry, finding dot nav host dot. Hopefully our bottom nav. I think I made a mistake here. Yeah, I did. So let's do it like the good program. Let's copy and paste something. Let's just copy the whole thing here and I'll explain it to you. Okay, so now you can see that when I click on saved movies, it moves to saved, and when I click on movies, it comes back here. And similarly, if you remember the navigation principles, when I to second fragment, my top up button is showing, but back you can see that it is now hidden. So we are on the right path. We are implementing all the principles of navigation. Okay, let's just forget about it. This and let's implement movies fragment. So let me just do the same thing here. We can just copy it from here. Yeah. This adapter, saved movies, activity view model, and and save binding, and we will implement on created function, and we will bind the binding to the view. And we will utilize our adapter, use fragment, use adapter, and then we will set the adapter to our recycler view. Dot dot separate list, and we will pass save movies. So let's run our app. So let's go and save this movie. And now you can see as our data is being shared through view model, just when we saved the movie from the other fragment, now it can be seen here, it is visible here. So we don't have to get the data again, we can just share that data between different fragments. Whole concept of view models and how data is retained inside a view model. If I change my screen orientation, uh, you can see that our data is still there. Our data is has not been lost on screen rotations. So this is what view model is and how it works. And if we go back, we have all the movies here and all the saved movies as well inside our list. So this is how view model works. View model is the most essential component of model view model architecture, and you guys just learn how you can work with it. And uh, let me now explain you, and you can do the same thing here as well. uh, Chapter or set on click listener, find nav controller that navigate, and then get save movies directions or details, and you can pass this movie. And this will do the same thing that our core is currently doing on movies fragment. And now let me explain the bottom navigation part to you. Okay, so for bottom navigation, the first thing we have to do, we have to give the menu items the same IDs that our fragments have, or our navigation graphs have inside any of our navigation graph. That is the first thing. The next thing is that we have to to our bottom navigation, and then we have to get a nav host fragment. The nav host fragment is the nav host fragment that we added at the start of this series, the one that we added inside our activity, and get it is as a nav host fragment. Then using that nav host fragment, we will get a nav controller. We have discovered what nav controller is. That then we have set we have done two things. The first thing is we have set our app bar configuration. If you now see, this is our movies fragment, this is the label that is set inside navhost. If we go here, this is fragment. If we go here, it is the saved movies, so that is the app bar configuration. And this is set display as home, the all the things that are related to the up button. Then we set that up with nav controller and app bar configuration. And then we set up our bottom navigation with that nav controller as well. So our bottom navigation knows which nav controller to use, and so that it can get the fragments through nav controller. So in the back, what our bottom navigation does is that for nav controller dot navigate. So it's the same concept all over again. Okay, now a critical part that we were discussing previously. If I go to movies and click here and go to save movies and come back to movies, the backstack is not maintained. If you want to maintain the backstack, so that if you go from here to here and you want to come back to this fragment, which is the principle of navigation, so what you can do is, instead of creating a simple nav graph, sorry, where is our nav graph? Instead of single nav graph, you can create multiple nav graphs. Let's create two nav graphs. So first is our movies graph, and then we have our saved movies. And now instead of doing all this here, we can just copy this from here and movie scroll. Let's just and save movie spot because we are using save movies here. Set this as the main and do the same here as well. Let's move to movie. Now we have two separate class, and now using fragments here, just connect my charger. Instead of adding fragments, we can navigation graphs here. So there is our movies graph, and this is our saved movies graph. Let's add. Let's give them ID, and is our let's set it as and give it an ID. The ID is right here. This is the ID. Let's just copy the whole thing and go to our menu. Here's our menu. So same ID, you can access it and copy this one's ID and add it to our menu. And let's now see what happens. So this is our now movies graph. Let's go here. Okay, somewhere. No, okay, no start destination has defined. Save movies graph and define the saved movies as start destination. And we are back inside our app. Let's go. Now let's go to saved movies. Gently we talk saved movies. Okay. Our backstack is. I think I have old dependency added rather than the new one. Yes, I have the old one. So if you go to share the dependency with and that one dependency with you. So when you actually upgrade your navigation component, this should actually start working. Have actually, but this is just dependency that I'm using. So this is how you can use multi in your app, and it will help you to maintain a backstack. The nav graph has its own backstack, and that is actually a good user. It's actually a navigation as well. So that is actually all for today. Let me just commit this code. If anyone of you wants to get this code, it will be available on my GitHub. Okay, guys, any questions? There's something called uh, launch modes. So let me just share my screen again. Okay, let answer that question really quick, and then let me know. I will be taking your questions. So here there are there are different launch modes called this launch single launch. There are other launch modes as well. You can explore that the problem that you are. So there is one thing that I didn't discuss during this talk, and that is called uh, conditional navigation. That you can check on your own because that will make your understanding more clear of the navigation graph. Okay, let me just share my GitHub link. Okay, you can find the code here. So back to from come back from fragment C to fragment B, your own resume function always gets called. On create view function always gets called. So that I found is that when you are inside your own create view function or on create view function, you should be checking if your binding is initialized or not. If your binding is not initialized, you be API again. So that will help you to call. That will help you have with this situation that your API will not get called again and again. Actually, I have shared the link. Sharing it again. Okay, guys, any other question that you have about the whole navigation thing that we talked about today? Okay, no questions, I guess.
Yes, guys, if you have any more questions. No questions? Okay.
So again, either I'm a very explain very well, or I
Yeah.
think that you this is best. Okay, I guess. So we can
Okay.
conclude this
If you don't have
session.
any more questions. Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Kashif Mahmood sir, for joining with us today. It was great
It
to
was
have you
great
here.
for having me
Yes, I wish
today.
you all the best for your future endeavors on behalf of my complete GDSC team. Also,
Thank you.
I'm sharing the feedback link, guys. Before leaving, you can fill out the feedback form to avail the certificates. Thank you for being such a great audience. It was really interactive. Okay, Muhammad Zubair, don't worry. I will send you the link if you're not able to see that. If you face any queries, guys, you can type that in the chat box.
And you can
Thank you
also
so much,
contact the
Kashif.
guys if anyone has any question. you can just ping me, hit me with a message. Actually, where I shared the link, you can just search my ID on GitHub Kashif dash, and you can get all the code that we wrote today inside the repo called navigation sample, and you can get that from. And anyone, if anyone has, you can always ping me on my LinkedIn, and I will be happy to help. For having me. To leave now. I will have to leave now.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you.
sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much, guys. Please don't forget to fill the feedback form.